Before we actually welcome the next panel, we have a video from Michigan Economic Development Corporation that I think is pretty cool. You guys check out here.
Start with the American dream, your American dream. It's time to wake up, time to make it real, and discover the power of pure opportunity. It's how entrepreneurs reach their full potential, how inventors and startups go on to change the world. This is Michigan, where the cities hustle harder and the workforce hustles hardest. This isn't just the American dream realized. This is success in its most concentrated form. Michigan, pure opportunity.
Awesome. Great. Well, great morning. I hope everybody's having good conversation and meeting lots of folks. So our next panel, we're going to discuss this coalition work that's been happening in the innovation ecosystem over the last several years, which led to, among other things, the formation of the Michigan Innovation Fund, which we've talked about, as well as current advocacy efforts to support the state's entrepreneurship and innovation budget, and an angel tax credit that we're working on right now as well. So I'll be moderating, and I'd like to welcome to the stage first Jen Hayes, who's Senior Vice President of Public Policy at Invest Detroit. Welcome. And then we have Kelly Sexton, who's Vice President of Innovation Partnerships at University of Michigan, and actually the chair of our board at Ann Arbor Spark. And then my boss, Paul Krutko, who's President and CEO of Ann Arbor Spark. Welcome. So I guess I'm going to set the table here a little bit and then have you guys do some introductions. But just to remind folks, this $60 million Michigan Innovation Fund, this is the largest allocation, to my knowledge, into the entrepreneurship ecosystem by the state in many, many years now. This came after about a 2-year effort with this coalition. It was collaborative among many stakeholders throughout the ecosystem. The largest portion of this is allocated to support the state's existing early stage venture funds, with the goal of investing in a lot more Michigan startups and then becoming evergreen funds, meaning generating returns that will continually get reinvested into sort of the next wave of startups. So hoping to create this virtuous cycle. Those awards were given to, as I said, the existing network of funds, which included Invest Detroit Ventures, Spark Capital, the University of Michigan Accelerate Blue Fund, Michigan Rise, and BRCC, which is affiliated with Western Michigan. And then there's also an allocation for emerging funds. So Invest UP, which manages the Michigan Outdoor Innovation Fund. I saw Jim Tenzillo here, who manages that. 20 Fathoms, and the Grand Valley Research Corporation in Grand Rapids also got an allocation. And then there's also, as you can see, there's some support for the entrepreneurial ecosystem programs in Michigan, as well as the Pitch Me competition that you've heard about probably from some of the folks this morning. Anything I missed there? Good. So here's the picture. This is we were there for some of the early coalition work, and then the governor signed this into law in January, and we just actually received the funds. I think most of our funds, so it does take a while, but we got there, and we're very happy about it. And so with that, I kind of wanted to turn it over to you guys, and Jen, if you could talk a little bit about your work at Invest Detroit and about your fund.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. My name is Jen Hayes. I lead the public policy work at Invest Detroit. I've been with the organization for almost 8 years. We not only do early stage venture capital investments, we're also a CDFI, which means we offer low-cost, flexible debt in the city of Detroit to support real estate, C&I, and small business lending. So a fairly large organization. Our early-stage venture capital investments are statewide, though. I lead policy work around innovation, CDFI work, and other community development efforts. I've been working with the innovation space now for 2.5, maybe 3 years, and it's been, I'm not an expert, but I've learned some of the terminology, and I have some great partners to learn from. So thank you for including me.
did you want me to advance? I don't know if you wanted to talk a little about this.
Sure. Yeah. So just to reiterate, here at Invest Detroit, we do real estate, C&I, small business lending, as well as have our ID Ventures team. We're really focused on impact. So we support a lot of folks that can't get traditional financing, and we do that through all of our work. So that is another area that you'll see here.
Kelly?
Yeah, so it looks like I'm up next, and I don't remember what slides I sent either, so I'll just kind of tell you who I am and what I do. So Kelly Sexton, I'm the Associate Vice President for Research, Innovation Partnerships, and Economic Impact at the University of Michigan, and I've also been here for nearly 8 years, which is kind of hard to believe, but it's really just been, you know, a dream job to get to work at the nation's finest university, find new innovations and technologies, and partner with the private sector to help create new world-changing startup companies and, you know, drive our innovation ecosystem forward. You know, as Peter mentioned, we're one of the most active and sort of busiest tech transfer offices in the country. Last year we had 673 new inventions created by University of Michigan faculty. Thank you, David. Which places us second in the country behind only MIT for volume of invention created, and 31 startup companies places us again in second place nationally, and we've been in that role for about 5 years now. But the quality is also very high of these startup companies, and so, you know, Peter really teed this conversation up nicely by going through the data about the challenges we face with some of our startup companies leaving Michigan. So all of this work that I've had the pleasure and honor of being engaged in around advocacy for the Michigan Innovation Fund, you know, really thanks to Jen's leadership here. Like, at some point we need to just give a round of applause to Jen for the work she's done here. It's been incredible. Thank you. She's done more than just pick up a word or two of the lingo. But, you know, it's really been around how do we create an environment where more of our startups are going to choose to stay in Michigan. We at the University of Michigan are going to continue launching world-changing startup companies built on amazing innovation. And we want to make it an obvious choice that this is the place for them to grow and scale. So thanks to everybody in this room. You're an important part of that equation. And through the work of the Michigan Innovation Fund to date and the work we hope to continue doing in partnership, you know, we want to make this just the obvious place to launch the next amazing world-changing startup.
I don't know what you put in here either, but my name is Paul Kretko. I'm the president and CEO of Vanoper Spark. I think when we have a session like this, there's often a tendency to focus on the glass half empty as opposed to the glass being more than half full. And why do I say that? Because ratings are ratings, as everybody knows. But a venture capital firm in Chicago rates Midwest ecosystems. Ann Arbor came in 5th. And you can say, oh, well, 5th, so what? Well, we were only behind Chicago, Indianapolis, Pittsburgh, and Minneapolis. So think about our size versus those communities. And then if you go into those ratings, we were number 2 to Chicago on a number of the metrics, one being the size of our exits and the volume of startups. So as I shared with Kelly, when we got that news some 21 years ago, Mary Sue Coleman, when she became president of the University of Michigan, came here and said, why don't we look like the area around Boston and MIT? Why don't we look like Palo Alto around Stanford? And she started a path that has resulted in not only Spark, but the Innovation Partnerships programs, initiating them. I mean, successive presidents have had to support that and take that on. So, I mean, I was struck by the comments this morning where you might think about this system and ecosystem here and go, oh my God, you know, the sky is falling. The point we want to make to you and why this innovation coalition was so important is we have a rich garden, and that's what I talk to legislators about. But we do not want to be the garden for the rest of the country. So we need to have tools here to help companies stay. The last part of my message, though, as an introduction, is there's a reason why major companies are locating R&D facilities here. So sort of to counter Peter's sort of arguments, KLA is here because the University of Michigan provided a rich resource connection, but they then found that this was a better place for their workers to be, and they have now in excess of 700 engineers and others here. They moved corporate functions here from California. Wacker Chemical has done the same thing. You just may have read about Torque with their new R&D facility here, as well as Sartorius. So in the recent past, major corporations look at this area and say there's talent, our burn rate is less, our money goes further. So a message to startups should be, well, if you've got some early stage capital, where better to spend it where it goes further than it clearly will go in California. And I speak from experience because before I came here, I spent 10 years in Silicon Valley. So I have a little bit of experience about how hard it is to do business in California.
Did you want to touch on
Sure.
our funds?
And so this is something that we, and I think Kelly has a similar slide to this.
It looks awfully similar. The different colors and the numbers are different, but yeah, that was a nice template.
But this speaks to the importance of the early capital and why we're almost at a call to action to you. We're very proud of the 60 million, but we need to do more because in comparison to other states, that isn't a very significant amount of money in terms of what the investment is. But here's why early capital is so important. If that 34.4 million had not been invested, we wouldn't see the follow-on investment of $1.1 billion. And we wouldn't have seen 217 companies supported. And it's a little bit about the success of who we've invested in. Look at $17 million in returns that we are able to put back into the system. So the early money is tremendously important, and that's why we've been so, I won't even say advocates, we've been strident about our advocacy at the state level, that gardening is more important for this state than smokestack chasing. And so we need to look at a balance of our spending and our resources in that regard. I think the next one is, and then, we talked a little bit about Angel. We've been for the last, 8 years?
12, yeah.
12. We have been trying to spur angel capital investment in the state of Michigan. And we created a concept of angel funds. What's the issue here? A lot of high net worths in Michigan, but they are not like on the coast. They don't know how to do this. So we create an opportunity for them to buy units in a fund in which we bring deals to them, and they can invest in a lot of startups with a little bit of money. But what the key point being is that caused them to co-invest in a much greater number than our 25 million. So we've been working on this angel tax credit. We're one of the few states, and the only state in the Midwest that doesn't have it. We need it.
And I'll just go back to Spark Capital for a minute because this sort of highlights all of our funds that have experience and track records that go back, between 5, 10, 20 years. And the state recognized that. And when they created this new Michigan Innovation Fund, they went and funded those experienced funds that had the capacity to continue to do this and hopefully, like I said, create evergreen funds. But maybe Jen, and a big shout out to Jen, as Kelly said, Jen really helped spearhead this effort and with her background. But could you maybe just start us off talking about how the Michigan Innovation Fund came together? And Kelly, I know, and Paul, you guys have things to say about the actual genesis too, but go ahead, each of you.
Yeah, so I had not done a ton of advocacy in the innovation. Well, let me start with this. So I was a former legislative staffer in the 2000s and helped work on the 21st Century Jobs legislation, which was the last piece of legislation to provide significant funding, which was 20 years ago. And when that funding started to go away, there was never any additional funding provided. And so now in my current role, I had not done a lot of innovation advocacy work. And in working with our ID Ventures team, Patty, who leads our team, tapped me on the shoulder and she said, I've been talking to Kelly and Paul, and we have this great idea. Will you help us with it? And we literally held some brainstorming sessions about what the goals were, and I put my old policy hat on. We literally hunkered down, created an outline for the bill, got the bill drafted, started working with partners who had the common goals that we did about this evergreen concept, and really started building a coalition, found an incredible champion and Representative Farhat, who really believes in this work, and we hit the ground running, and not only did that happen, but we found an administration that believed in the work, and Governor Whitmer put it in her budget. One of the things that really helped us that I want to highlight is we found a funding source. And anyone knows when you're working with the state legislature, if you're asking for general fund dollars, everybody's asking for general fund dollars. And we were able to look at a capital source called the Venture Michigan Fund. I don't know if any of you are aware of it. It was created in 2003 by Senator Bishop, and it was a fund-to-funds model, and they had received a bunch of returns in the recent years from the Moderna vaccine and some other investments as well. And so we were able to, unfortunately, not all of it came to us. Some of it went back to other programs at MEDC and Leo and elsewhere, but that's where the $60 million came from. And so we can go into all the details of how it came together, but it really started with partners in the ecosystem, looking at what other states were doing and say, we need to leverage that here, but do it in a way that meets our needs here in Michigan, and to start to build momentum. I think, the only thing I want to add is one thing that I've really learned about this community is when you have a community and an ecosystem that has been starved for resources for 2 decades, it's really hard to build collaboration when you're all competing for limited dollars. And I think what this movement, I'm going to call it a movement, has done for us is I think we've realized that we're stronger together. And if we do this together, we're all going to win at the end of the day. And I think from when this passed last year to even the size of the coalition today, I think it's tripled. And I think we're all realizing that we can't be one and done. There are several things this ecosystem needs. And I think the Innovation Fund was just a start. But I'll let Kelly and Paul talk about how we got started. But that's how I got started in this work.
Yeah, fantastic. No, that's a great overview, Jen. So, for us at Innovation Partnerships, it really started with, kind of some of the data around our startup companies leaving. And we had done, a 5-year look back. We had seen that University of Michigan startups in 5 years had raised $3.8 billion in venture capital, which is a great number. Any university would be very proud of that. But when we looked into the data, we saw that about half of the companies that raised venture capital had left the state, and they had raised 2.9 billion of the total. And the startups that stayed in Michigan, they raised the remainder, but about 80% of that capital came from out of state. So overall, across the board, we were seeing that 95% of capital going into University of Michigan startup companies was coming from out of state. And so, it was just plain, as day that we have a mismatch between venture capital in our ecosystem and intellectual capital that we're creating at the University of Michigan. So we need to do more to create this garden so the startups can flourish here. So really what Spark had done with Spark Capital was the sort of inspiration for us to create something called the Accelerate Blue Fund, which we launched in 2019 with $200,000 in donor commitments to the fund. But we knew that we would be successful in raising this fund through philanthropy if we could get access to the Michigan Alumni Network, which we did. And we knew that we could deploy the capital and have returns come back into the fund and grow it to an evergreen status, because we had seen what Spark had done. They had $17 million returned to the fund that they could then use to reinvest. So we knew the model was there. So we've been raising the Accelerate Blue Fund, and we're having success there. And at Innovation Partnerships, one of the other things that President Mary Sue Coleman did 20 years ago was say, you need a national advisory board for university leadership around tech transfer. And she did an amazing job of pulling in leaders from across the country as well as local. And, we've got a great advisory board. So my colleague, Mike Sarathakis, and I were pitching this idea to the National Advisory Board of taking the Accelerate Blue model and scaling it statewide. We have a lot of experience at Innovation Partnerships of collaborating with our fellow tech transfer offices across the state. We all share a variety of resources through the MTRAC program, the Technology Transfer Talent Network, the Advanced program, so many wonderful ways that we share resources to spur university tech transfer across the state. These are all made possible by Allison's amazing innovation and entrepreneurship team that funds these shared resources. So we've got all this collaborative muscle memory with other university tech transfer offices. And we were like, we need a way to fund the startups coming out of universities. So we pitched this concept of a statewide university research commercialization fund that could be evergreen to our National Advisory Board, on which sits Paul Krutko and Patty Glaza of Invest Detroit. And they said, that's a good idea. We're working on similar ideas. We think we'd all be more successful if we came together as a coalition to elevate our voices. And that was our spring meeting, I think now 3 years ago, Paul. And that was how I got introduced to the wonderful Jen Hayes and got on this journey that's led me to Lansing so many times.
Anything you want to add, Paul?
No, I want to talk about everybody in this room becoming advocates at the state of Michigan for what we need to do.
We'll get there.
All right.
We'll get there. So, maybe we can talk next about, and I thought this is just interesting for other people to hear, kind of getting in the weeds of how the process went and what that journey looked like. And maybe I can start maybe a little bit just to say, we've been meeting, I think, as a coalition, which has gradually grown over that 2.5 year period. I think meeting every other Friday for that whole period. And this literally came down to the 11th hour. I think the last voting day, and we were all sitting there watching the Senate session, hoping it would come together after 2 years of work. But you guys want to kind of add pieces to that and color to how this process worked?
Sure, I'm happy to start, but I don't know if Kelly or Paul, if you guys want to start. Like I said, I think once we found our champion, we held a press conference because I think we felt that it was such a big deal for people to know why it was important. And so we held a press conference, and I think that really, and it was bipartisan. I think that's the other thing we should highlight. We did this in a bipartisan way. So we had Republican and Democrats that cared about this. And I think once the bills were introduced and they were in the budget, the funding was in the budget, I wouldn't say that it was necessarily difficult to convince people, but politics right now is really difficult. And so I think the thing I always tell everyone about advocacy and policy work is that you meet and you meet and you meet and you ask and you ask and you ask and you testify. Kelly, how many times have you testified? 3 at least. Yeah. And it's a lot of work, and it's a commitment to do policy. I think what we really learned along this journey is legislators don't understand the innovation economy. And we have a big innovation economy in Michigan. And so we really focused on the core of this legislation and telling them we're going to come back, right? This is just the first step in this work. And I think getting it through the budget was just one process. Then we have what they call, to get technical, they call them kind of companion bills or budget implementation bills. And that's what outlines the program and how you're going to spend the money. And it was literally the last day of a legislative cycle, and it was the second to last vote. I think they'd been voting for 36 hours straight. I think most of us got 3 hours of sleep that night. So that shows we all were literally just crossing our fingers that they were actually going to put the bills up for a vote. But I think what was most exciting is the bills all passed by a supermajority, which means more than 3/4 of both the House and the Senate supported this issue. And I think that's a great sign for us as an ecosystem, too, that we have momentum, but we have a lot of work left to do.
No, go ahead
as well.
and clap.
Yeah.
Clapping's welcome.
Hey.
But I think I live in this world, so I would love to hear, I think for Kelly, I know I kind of pulled you into this and asked a lot of you along the way, and Paul too. I know Patty from our team, a lot of this was new. I don't want to take Mike's job away from him, but I would love to for you to share because I think a lot of folks don't understand policy and what it really takes to do this. And I think when we ask all of you here at the end to help us, I would love for you to share your thoughts on the journey that we had last year, because it was an interesting journey, and even what you learned in that legislative process through this important issue.
Okay. Well, I think the main thing that is a lesson relearned for someone that's been in this business for a long time is the importance of coalitions. It doesn't matter whether it's the administration or it's the legislature. When you're one entity talking to them, then they can deal with you as one entity. When you put a coalition together of these funds that are doing this work across the state, that gets a different reaction. And so this lesson is something that we've been learning and maybe borrowing from BLM. In addition to our coalition, there was another coalition of the regional economic development organizations, which Spark happens to be one of them. There are 9. Grand Rapids has one, LEAP has one, and so on. And we came out with what we believe are the 10 top priorities that the state needs to consider in terms of economic development tools. This was one, signature one, included in that. So it wasn't just our coalition, it was a larger coalition that is having that conversation. But Jen's right. I'm channeling a former chair, Cynthia Wilbanks, of the University of Michigan, who's now retired, who led the university's advocacy efforts in Lansing. You have to talk to everybody, because if you just talk with folks who you think have the sense that they like what you're doing or embrace the kind of programming, that's not enough votes. And so you have to talk to everybody. The challenge, though, right now for us in this world of trying to get resources is, just getting into the weeds on this, the Republican caucus on the far right doesn't want to do this at all. They see that picking winners and losers. And on the left, the progressives call this corporate welfare. So we have to find the middle, the people that understand that we are at a competitive disadvantage to Ohio, to Illinois, to Minneapolis. We're not just talking about California and Boston. We're talking about our own region that is investing significantly more than this. So it's a constant going over there. And I have to say, we're when you come from Ann Arbor, they all go, okay, well, this is as blue as you can be. Well, why are you here talking to me? And I'm spending my time talking to the other Republican side from other places in the state, because again, our delegation wants to do this, right? It's convincing those who are a little skeptical or have a different view. And that's where the gardening message has really resonated with them about growing your own, supporting small businesses, growing them to scale here, as opposed to some of the things we've been doing in the recent past, billions of dollars trying to get a battery plant. So that's part of what I would share.
Just one thing I'd add to that is I didn't know that this coalition was missing in my life until it was developed. And now I can't imagine us not having it. And the reason I say that is it's, the process of going to Lansing and realizing how little awareness there is about the role of startups and innovation and driving our economy forward, how important that's going to be to our economic growth as a state and to reverse population decline and create economic opportunity. There's a lot of work and education that needs to be done. It can't just fall on a couple of people. There needs to be, lots of people, going and having these conversations and providing different perspectives from across the state. So that's been very important for this specific initiative. But what I did not foresee was that sort of at the moment of our greatest triumph of, having this $60 million Michigan Innovation Fund move forward, that somehow we'd be in a position where we were then having to leverage our work of our coalition and these relationships to explain why we needed to keep $15.6 million in the state budget to fund our statewide innovation and entrepreneurship programming that's so important to keeping our pipeline of innovation moving across the state. And so, things sound positive at the moment, but they have seemed quite bleak for several months as we've worked as a coalition to really make the case for why the state needs to make an investment. We saw Peter's numbers. Michigan as a state has already been underinvesting in innovation and entrepreneurship as a percentage of GDP. It was set to go to $0 this year. And so without having this coalition in place and having people who were already part of the conversation who could carry this message, I don't think we would have, we've not yet succeeded, but it's looking positive. we would have been sunk. Like we just wouldn't have been able to get that message to as many people in Lansing as needed to hear it about why this is important.
And we talked a lot about today already, and this is what some of this slide represents about seed money. This is going into companies that have been established. They potentially have their first customers. They're trying to move forward. This is resources to get them to a Series A. But the money that Kelly's talking about and the worry that I had is this is money even before that. This is to help get an idea out of the lab. And what we were trying to say in our briefings of legislators is we may look very good 2-3 years from now based on the things that have come out of the lab. Kelly talked about the number of invention disclosures. But if we don't have that very early money, and if you think about, I mean, for all of us, yes, $15.7 million sounds like a lot of money. But if you compare that to the overall state budget and what we're talking about spending on roads, it's less than, 0.1%. So, but these investments are what enables the state to have revenue in the future. And when, economic development professionals go over there, that's one of the things we tell them. All the decisions you're making generally are about spending money. This is a decision to invest so that you have resources to spend in the future. So it was very wrong-headed, not casting stones anywhere, but both the House budget zeroed out all economic development funding. That was their proposal. The Senate, to our surprise, didn't include this money. And then the governor did, fortunately, put it in her budget. So as this discussion is going on right now over there, we're very hopeful that we have advocates that as things get cut and put on the cutting room floor, if you want to describe it that way, that this funding keeps getting put back up on the table as something that we really need to do as a state. So.
Well, maybe next, that kind of sets me up next to talk about what we think the impacts of this program will be. And thank you, Jen, for this slide. I don't know if you want to walk through this and you guys want to chime in about what we think this could do over the next 5, 10 plus years.
Sure, I'm happy to. So as part of the work, when we put the Innovation Fund proposal together, all of the 5 evergreen funds that had been established, this was through 2023. We looked at the total dollars we'd all invested, number of companies, dollars leveraged, returns, jobs created. And we took that and we said, okay, this is what the 5 evergreen funds, our impact is through 23. But if we're all fully funded at a level, I think we were using around 65 million as our number, that we believe if we can get that invested, we can be self-sustaining. What could that look like in the future? So we believe that with that, we could easily be creating, tons of jobs, tons of startups, and tons of capital and leveraged capital, private capital for the state. But I think more than anything, those numbers are just the initial investments. When you think about the revolving nature of these funds, that's just the starting point. And when you're thinking about other emerging funds that we have around the state as well, this is even bigger. So this is really just the preliminary numbers of what we think is possible, especially on the early stage side.
Do you want to add something, Kelly?
Yeah, I want to say, I think, what we put together was, really conservative. I think we will absolutely, meet those metrics and, even exceed beyond them. This is, if you take the work we've done with Accelerate Blue Fund, for example, and just project it out, even where we are today, with a fund that's, only been around since 2019, projected out, we would hit those marks. So it's the impact that you're going to see from these funds is going to be so significant, both in terms of, leverage dollars, returns to the funds, but also in terms of job creation. That's the piece that's very important. We want to be able to provide amazing jobs for the graduates coming out of our great universities, here in Michigan, make it easier to get your kid who's at Stanford to move back to Mission, because there are amazing jobs in high growth companies and they can have fantastic careers here in Michigan. Like, that's really what we're trying to do.
Yeah, it's one of the things that we have another slide which we're not showing here, but we have something that we show that's the virtuous cycle of economic development. And what that's about is that when we invest in one of these companies, it's not that they just sit on the money. They buy goods and services in the community. They pay salaries to people who then are getting goods and services that they're purchasing. So you create a virtuous cycle in which, as companies grow, it generates tax revenue, employment, other things for the community, which keeps this going. We all understand when a company leaves here and what that means, that those folks are unemployed, that they are not contributing in the economy. So this is the other side of it. It's not just that we're investing in these companies, we're trying to grow the overall economy in Michigan. And it has another corollary benefit, which is we need to grow the population of the state. So another reason to retain these companies here, even if you don't like the idea of investing in terms of a politician, this is a way that we can grow the population of the state that we desperately need, because we are losing population to other states as we speak.
Awesome. Well, so we had this big win this year, December, January timeframe. We've been working through that process, but I was happy to see, Jen and Paul and Kelly weren't going to let this coalition just go after we had one win, right? So it's continued on through this year at the same pace, and working on other things. Of course, the E&I budget potential cut has been a big issue. But do you guys talk a little more about maybe how this coalition's proceeded over the last year and what we're continuing to work on?
I'll chime in, Jen. We are organizing ourselves because we have a gubernatorial election coming up here. We want to make every candidate that is running for the chief executive position of this state to tell us what they are going to do in this area. We need to hold the elected officials to task. Do they think this is important, or do they think it's not important? That should be a key factor in any kind of election. What is the economic future of the state of Michigan? So next year is going to be really critical in 2026. The regional partnerships have already started asking these candidates to come before us and explain their economic strategy for the state of Michigan. And that's got twofold reasons to do it. We want to hear it, but second of all, we want to sensitize them to the issues. Again, how informed are these individual candidates about the importance of this? Can we give some education as they are beginning to prepare their campaigns?
I think the one thing I would add is when we made this commitment early on, for the 60 million, if we should clarify, our first ask was 150 million, and we ended up with 60. And I think for us, I think I can speak for the coalition when I say we are not going to be one and done. We were asking for another 60 million this year. I don't think we're going to be able to secure that because of the tough cycle that we're in right now, budget cycle. But I think the commitment that we want to make to everyone in this room is, when you think about what Ohio and Indiana are doing, they're providing almost $100 million a year, and they have been for decades. Right? So, we are so far behind. If we want to get even close to being competitive, we need to be providing $100 million a year. And right now we've been providing $15 million, just to put it in perspective. So we are not one and done. We are going to keep doing this work. And anyone that wants to be part of this work, we welcome your help. And I think the innovation fund, although it was a big target, was the evergreen funds, and we want to get all of us to that level. There are other needs in the ecosystem, and please know that we recognize that, and we want to build that into our long-term strategy. And I think having a team like Ben and Allison and Natalia, Natalia are here. They understand the importance. They're help leading us as well. And I think having a strong team at the state is helpful, but we need all of us in the ecosystem to support them in their work as well. And I just want everyone to know that we are committed to trying to get not only funding, but programs like an angel tax credit. I know David and Don are here. We need to be thinking uniquely, what are other states doing, but what should we be doing to make our innovation system ecosystem unique and thriving so that we can blow Peter's numbers out of the water in a decade, right? That's our goal. So just know we're committed.
And I want to say thank you to David and to others for, bringing the angel tax credit, as a policy consideration for the Innovation Fund. That was why the coalition was created. we want to have an amazing ecosystem, and making sure that we have, the smart policies in place that support a thriving, angel investment community is a really important part of that. So, just to, recommit Jen's offer, smart policy to support an innovation ecosystem is something we're interested in learning about and bringing into the coalition. So, we appreciate the good ideas that have already been brought forward and welcome others.
It's important too that those of you in the room that are either have been involved in startups or early stage companies or scaling them up, or people that are working to fund those companies, your voice is really important in this. And that may sound like you hear that all the time, but it is, because my experience is that this kind of advocacy is listened to and appreciated, and it's the stories we tell, not the numbers that we show. The other thing, just as if you are having those conversations, one of the things, getting to Jen's point about one and done, is that the state over the years that I've been here, which is now 15 years, does not have a consistent policy structure. As different people come in, we go this way and that way. We have a program, then the program disappears. We need to encourage our elected officials in this state, which is a purple state. We need to encourage them that this needs to be like foreign policy used to be. What is he saying? Well, I worked in Florida, I worked in Ohio, and I worked in California. In all of those three states, politicians don't fight about economic development in this. They can fight about everything else. But the governor and the legislature are in lockstep that they want to bring prosperity to the people of their state. And investing in this way is something important to do. So we not only need what we're talking about, these programs, but we need to be consistently putting them forward, because as somebody who's worked other places, our competitors say Michigan never stays the course. So if you want to make an investment, maybe you ought to look at another state, because it will be consistent. So we not only need these programs, we need them to be consistently funded over time.
You keep setting up my next slide. Thank you. I thought I'd put, no, that's perfect. Segue. So, I mean,
you can tell we've been over there doing this for months.
Yeah. Well, no, I just wanted to point out, so I think that, and Jen, you can expand on this a bit, but the Michigan Innovation Coalition, this letter of support that Jen and her team have put together was really focused on securing the E&I, this $15 million E&I budget. I don't know if you were able to say anything, comfortable to say anything on the status of that, but I think it would still be helpful for people to sign on to this if they're comfortable doing that.
Yeah, for anyone who's following the state budget process, and the federal budget process for that matter, today is the last day of both budget cycles, and so there's a chance for a shutdown in both governments. But the good news on the state side is there seems to be a framework for an agreement. They're working through each of the budgets right now. I think we're hopeful we're going to start to see details of those later today, and hopefully voting tomorrow by the end of the week. We are hearing good things about the E&I line, that we think that's going to be held at the 15.6 or 7 million, which is really exciting. Unfortunately, I don't think there's going to be any extra this year for the Innovation Fund. But I think, again, we're committed, and we're already talking about fiscal year 27 and working with the MEDC team on what that could look like. So just know, I think we're protecting a really important program, but are ready to continue to work on that. But I think we'll see details over the next couple of days about what that looks like as well. But I should say this letter is a letter to the legislature, where anyone who signs up here, the organization name just goes onto a letter so that we can show the number of folks that are supporting this issue. I think as of yesterday, we had 75 organizations. And so it's a great, just general letter of support if your organization is interested in being a part of that.
Yeah, and maybe we should just say what the 15.7 million supported across the state. So one piece, and the reason I've been very activated on this, is it supports shared infrastructure among university tech transfer offices to enable research commercialization. So wonderful mentor in residence program, postdoctoral fellow programs that lead to amazing CEOs of startups that some of you have probably invested in. It also supports, in addition to that, business incubators to the tune of about $5.8 $2.8 million in entrepreneurial services as well that are very crucial, especially for companies going after SBIR, STTR. That's about $2.45 million, a little over $1 million in pilot projects that the I&E team gets to run. I mean, think about that, like $1 million for the whole state in piloting new innovation programs. So it's not been, a huge investment on behalf of the state, but the ROI has been tremendous. I mean, we were talking about Histosonics earlier. That company was supported through these programs in its earliest stages. And today we have what we think, if someone knows of a different story, please tell me. We think this is the largest med tech university spin out liquidity event of all time at $2.25 billion. And, Peter mentioned, 40 jobs in Ann Arbor, an advanced research center that the company spent $60 million with no state support, building out and upfitting, hiring our graduates, and planning to grow. So this is these are huge wins. This creates tax revenue for the state, and the amount it costs to fund these things is very light.
Well, I have a lot more questions, but I'd rather hear folks in the audience have questions. We got microphones if anybody has something they're curious about.
So, Jen, you mentioned earlier about the piece of legislation that lasted about 20 years that was depleted. Do you know how much that was?
It's a really good question. So we were using the securitized tobacco settlement money. So I believe it was about $75 million a year for about 5 years, I believe it was, and then it was reduced. And there hasn't been funding after that.
Yeah, so under the Snyder administration, we were funded, the funding for these programs was at $100 million. So it's consistently gone down, and now the governor's proposal is a little under 16 million.
Hi, my name is Steve Braddock. I own a company called Braddock Enterprise, as also EV Charging Pod, but started up a new company with some partners using the technology from the parent companies that I just referenced. We actually have a letter because we use consultants and lobbyists to get us a matching funds letter from the state of Michigan. But because of the current administration, everybody is very shy about going out and actually supporting our initiative for job creation, manufacturing, of high-tech technologies like battery energy storage systems and EV chargers. We can't get anybody to actually, pull the trigger, even doing the year one, which we lowered the threshold. Do you see a lot of the same types of issues out there because people are risk adverse because of the current administration and not sure of what tomorrow's going to come?
So I'm happy to give you the political answer, and I think both state and federally, we are at a time of divisive, the highest divisiveness I think I've ever seen in this time. I think from a state perspective, there's a lot of, and to my friends from MEDC, they're going to understand when I say this, there are some challenges with our the legislature and their level of confidence in MEDC, whether it's fair or not, that's not for me to decide. But I think we're going to see an MEDC, which, as many of you know, leads all of our economic development things, and they've done a great job, in my personal opinion. But I think they're a 40-year-old entity now, and it's created in a unique way, and Paul knows this, that not every state has the same structure. I think we're at a time where there's an interest in what that change could look like, and I think that in the area that you're at, there's this uncertainty around where do we invest today if we're going to think about a revised economic development strategy and entity. I think I'm hoping that there will be more clarity over the next year and into the new administration, but that's 18 months away. So I think how do we, in a softening economy, banks and other areas pulling back on investment, and I think what you're hearing from us is we need the state to lean in, and how do we get the state to lean in? And I think even beyond innovation, I do a lot of work in community development and other broader economic development. we have a lot of work to do with our legislature to figure that out. And we can't, although we are planning for the next governor, we don't want to wait for that either. So I don't have a good answer, but it is a tough time, and I think you're acknowledging that.
Maybe this isn't an answer to your question, but maybe we should make sure we say this. The evergreen funds are decisions made by the evergreen funds. So we do not have to clear our investments. I mean, there are guardrails around what we are to use the money for, but Mike leads our team and he is reviewing proposals all the time. And when he gets through his committee and brings it to me, I'm the final decision maker. I sign off on making the investment. So the decisions of those funds are all with those funds. I don't know the mechanics of what you did with the state, but that would be the difference in working with these funds. And I checks, he says, it's time to write a check, and the check comes in from Tom Crawford in my back, who's my CFO, and I sign it.
Well,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I know there's a lot of other questions out there. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. I don't know if you guys have any parting, two-word, you can only say two-word thoughts. No, I'm kidding. Anything you guys want to add before we conclude?
I think the only message I want to leave everyone with is we all want your help. And if you're interested, you can either just email me or work with Mike, and we'll make sure we get you involved in the work that we're doing. But the coalition is open to everyone. And even if you just want the information and aren't sure about advocacy, we will offer help. But if you want to be a part of it, we would welcome you.
All three of us have excellent websites with lots of information that you can arm yourself with the arguments that we're making. And don't think a cocktail party conversation isn't helpful. It is, okay? So we just need to build this voice of the importance of our economy around startups in terms of the state's overall approach.
Thank you all so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you, panelists. That was great. Okay, don't go anywhere yet. That was a great session. I hope everybody found that interesting like I did. So next, we're going to have our second company presenter. It's you. We've got Jim Millar. Sorry for the chairs here on the stage, Jim, but if you were going to run all over the place, yeah. But Jim's the CEO of Aterix, which is based up in Traverse City, doing a great therapeutics company. So I hope you all find it interesting. And
oh, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Jim Millar, and I'm the CEO of Aterix Biotherapeutics. We're a specialty pharmaceutical company developing clinical innovations for the prevention and the treatment of multi-drug resistant bacterial infections, a big problem. As a matter of fact, it's such a big problem that the World Health Organization has declared it the #1 public health problem in the world. And there's a quote that just came out very recently, I'm going to read briefly, that the problem is so serious that it threatens the achievements of modern medicine, a post-antibiotic era in which common infections and minor injuries can kill is a very real possibility. Very sobering comment. As a matter of fact, if nothing's done about it, they're estimating that by the year 2050, 10 million people will die a year due to issues and complications with antibiotic resistance. That's up from 700,000 in 2020. We're actually got 2 products in development. I'm only going to be able to talk about one today. I'll introduce the other one briefly. But our main product, lead product, which is getting ready to get into clinical trials, addresses catheter-associated urinary tract infections. Huge problem in hospitals. It's the #1 hospital-acquired infection and of actual CAUTI is what I'll call it, the catheter-associated urinary tract infection. Over nearly 500,000 catheter-associated urinary tract infections a year. They cost anywhere from $14,000 to $32,000 to treat, which is very costly to the hospital. We're talking about $6.2 billion. Most people think that UTIs are no big deal. You just go to the doctor, you get a bunch of antibiotics, and clears up. Well, in fact, upwards of 45,000 to 50,000 people die a year from catheter-associated urinary tract infections. On the bottom of the screen is a big point. Medicare no longer will reimburse hospitals for catheter-associated urinary tract infections. They will pay for the prevention of it. So big distinction. As I mentioned, we do have two products. Our first product, that is our lead product, is for the prevention of catheter-associated urinary tract infections. It uses bacterial interference to do that. But briefly, our second product is a wound care product that treats gram-negative bacterial infections, primarily in wounds and burns. The unique part about this product is that the bacteria does not develop resistance to this product. So very unique. Back to C1205 though, unique with this product is we actually have data on over 220 human patients that were done at studies in Europe and the US. And we know for a fact from that data that it does prevent catheter-associated urinary tract infections. So how does it work? Hopefully the animation works. It does, good. So with this, you have the coated catheter is placed in the bladder. Once it's secure in the bladder, it quickly colonizes the bladder and forms a very robust biofilm. And then once that biofilm is established, the pathogenic bacteria are unable to take hold because our harmless bacteria has consumed all the nutrients in the urine. So very, very simple, but very, very effective. That was in case the didn't work. The animation didn't work. So we do have, as I mentioned, data on over 220 patients across 14 studies in US and Europe, primarily the ones at Baylor College of Medicine. I'm going to share a little bit of the results of that. It does show significant reduction in CAUTI, and there's been no symptoms of infection or adverse effect in any of the studies we've done. And because of all that information and data, we recently received fast track designation from the FDA. So here's a quick example of one of the studies that was done at Baylor. In this study, the patients, before they were treated, were having as many as 9.9 CAUTIs a year. That's almost one a month. Once treated with our product, it dropped down to below 1, 0.55. So huge reduction in the incidence of CAUTI, so therefore reduces cost, reduces the use of antibiotics, and hopefully reduces the spread of antibiotic resistance. So where are we right now? We have our IND fully approved by the FDA. We are getting ready to start our clinical trial here in the first quarter of 2026. Because we have all that data from the studies, particularly done at Baylor, the FDA has agreed to combine our studies, phase 1, phase 2, and instead of the normal 100 plus subjects you need, they agreed to just 40, 10 for our phase 1B and 30 for our phase 2. So dramatically reducing our costs, hopefully getting us to the end of phase 2 quicker. Again, as I mentioned, we have received fast track designation and we're looking to begin treating patients first quarter 2026. We do have a very strong IP portfolio and protection. Our base patent is through a license with Baylor College of Medicine, but we do have our own patents that we've done that really are focusing on the mechanism delivery, the preparation, the manufacturing. So we believe we have a very, very strong IP portfolio, and we have multiple international patents as well. Big market. Our first focus is on indwelling catheters, and that's with hospital patients, long-term care patients, and patients with neurogenic bladders. And that adds up to about an $8 billion market. We are going to be looking very quickly as we get in towards phase 3 at intermittent catheters. That adds another 8 million to the size of the market, so total is 17 billion, 8 billion. So where we are right now is we are in site selection. We're working with some of the top rehab hospitals as well as some of the top urology clinics in the country. We're getting close, hopefully, to get to contract with at least 2 of them. We're being told by the FDA consultants that that's probably all we're really going to need is 2 sites. Really quick, our timeline here is really focusing on manufacturing and on the clinical trials themselves. The big, as you can see from here, Q1 is a big time frame for us to get our manufacturing up and ready to go, and the product ready to go, and our clinical studies up and going with our sites. So we have a great team put together. I have spent most of my career in early stage medical device and life science companies. I'm joined by Dr. Stephen Watt and Dr. Cale Dorsey. They both have PhDs in microbiology and are experts in the field of bacterial interference. We have a great advisory group as well, 3 urologists, 1 wound care. As a matter of fact, Dr. Glenn Warnenberg is a fellow right here at University of Michigan, so we're proud of that. But these advisors have been extremely helpful in the drafting of our IND, but also our request for fast track. So we're currently raising money, a convertible debt for $5 million. It's got your typical terms, 8% interest. It's for 3 years. It is a 20% discount on the next qualified financing or a $20 million cap. To date, this is a little dated now, even just in these days. We've got 1.5 million received or documents signed on, and we actually are up to about 2 million soft circled. So it's been a good couple of weeks since we've done this. I did want to show that we do have Michigan-based groups that have been supporting us. So we are one of the stories of having our glass half full as far as the assistance with the Michigan ecosystem. And then just the last slide here, just a little bit of information on what's going on out there in the liquidity market. Our goal is to actually have a liquidity event by the end of phase 2. And this is some of the statistics out there that show that the average deal size in this space is 700 million. But the key point here is the majority of those are happening after phase 2 before approval. And then there's a few examples of some of the more recent transactions that have been done, some pretty good size ones. The top 2 actually are the ones that are extremely focused on the antibiotic resistance problem. And so you're seeing more and more targeted acquisitions specifically towards antibiotics. Thank you.